Hello, BookTube. It's been a while since I did a page 112 tag, so I thought I'd do that today. For those of you who don't know what that is, it was created by Sean the Book Maniac over on his channel, and it's an adaptation of a French literary prize in which the judges are given only page 112 of the books under consideration. Not the beginning, and not the rest of the book, and not even the title of the author. They're just given page 112 to make their consideration whether or not they want to see more of the book. And the assumption is, I think, a correct one, which is that the beginning of any book is heavily gone over, more so than the rest of the book. Unfortunately, the way publisher editorial staffs are these days, that's probably true. Which means that if you want to see the author, so to speak, in their natural habitat, without the guidance and training wheels of half a dozen other people, you want to jump ahead to around page 112. It's an arbitrary number, but I think it serves a good point. So of course, as you can tell from that description, the most natural way to do a page 112 tag is for someone else to send you just page 112 of 3 different books. And I would love to do that, but I'm not very popular on BookTube, apparently because I smell. So people don't send me page 112. I asked the tag's creator, Sean the Book Maniac, if maybe he would send me 3 page 112s so that I could do his own tag, and he said, I believe his exact quote was, "Girlfriend, you trippin'." So I thought I'd do one myself. And we're going to do, because it's this channel, we're going to do a boring old nonfiction page 112 tag. Now, I already know what these books are, but I thought to preserve as much of the spirit of the original as possible, I would pick 3 books I haven't actually read yet, so we can sort of dig into their prose together. So here's the first one, and we'll get into all of these once we're done. Here's the first one. This first major aggressive North Pacific exercise of the Reagan administration was, in fact, a very big deal. Although along the nearly simultaneous North Atlantic and Eastern Mediterranean naval exercises, it demonstrated a global coordinated air and naval threat to the Soviets from 3 axes. Enterprise and Midway would build on this experience in the following year with the same commanding officers in Fleet X-83-1. These northern exercises were a new experience for most of the fleet, since political activity had kept the Navy from northern latitudes for years. These first experiences reminded the Navy that Arctic seas are dangerous and unforgiving, so increased training was essential. As part of this realization, the Pacific Fleet, from October 15th to December 15th, conducted ICEX-82, training the Arctic operations and cold weather drills. On November 2nd, the nuclear attack subs Tautog and Aspro surfaced together at the North Pole to demonstrate to the Soviets that they could face missile attacks from any azimuth at any time of year. Okay, so it's lean, it's fairly propulsive, it's obviously not taking any time to explain the various naval designations or the commanders or the exercise names or whatnot, probably because we're getting it in page 112. But it was very clear and very, very quick to read. So provisional thumbs up. Now we'll move on to our next one here. And that is this one. Let's see what we have here. Raleigh's Charter suddenly seemed potentially lucrative again when the price of sassafras rose to dizzying heights on the European market in the late 1590s. So we're obviously talking about Sir Walter Raleigh. The smooth and slender tree noted by Harriet grows naturally from northern Florida to Maine and prefers the sandy coastal soil. Native Americans made an orange-colored tea with its root to cure everything from acne to urinary tract infections. The Choctaw of Louisiana showed the French settlers how to use it to thicken their gumbo. Filet powder is still made from the dried and crushed sassafras leaves. Today, we know that in excess, sassafras can cause cancer, but in 16th century Europe, it was considered a miracle drug. A Seville physician publicized its wonders in the 1570s. Harriet touted its rare virtues in medicine for the cure of many diseases. It was rumored the root could even remedy the dreaded French pox, the syphilis, when then ravaging Europe. Soon, desperate patients would pay whatever the price to obtain this magical substance. The primary alternative was a heavy dose of mercury, feared for its horrific side effects, which included loss of speech and hearing and, frequently, a slow and painful death. At the time of the Roanoke voyages, a pound of sassafras sold for 18 English pounds a ton. A decade later, the same amount was worth more than 300 English pounds, or nearly $100,000 in today's currency. With his charter covering much of the North American East Coast, Raleigh held a monopoly over English competitors. He even impounded the stock of one merchant who obtained more than a ton of sassafras in New England. He sued the interloper, citing his legal claim to the shipment. Quote, "All ships and goods are confiscate that shall trade there without my leave," he wrote to a member of Queen Elizabeth I's Privy Council, adding that his competitors' attempt to dump a huge cargo on the market would depress prices and ruin his own profits. Raleigh's interest in Virginia, dormant for well over a decade, swiftly revived. "I shall yet live to see it an English nation," he valiantly wrote in 1602. Okay, that was also very good. That digression on the nature and the use of sassafras leaves could easily have been handled very poorly, right? As a digression to give you a very quick but good, solid sense of why sassafras was valuable and why it might bloom in price, that was pretty good. It was fast. It was well integrated into the narrative so that you don't feel like you're stopping the story of Walter Raleigh money grubbing in the New World. And that bit about Raleigh confiscating a huge shipment of sassafras that had been illegally shipped through New England takes a bit of digging. That's not in the normal Walter Raleigh biographies. So that betokens that you're in good hands, that you're in good historical hands. I like that. So that was good. We've got two in a row. Now we'll move on to the third one, and then we'll talk a little. So let's see here. Thanks to the reporters following the Army of the Tennessee, Logan had a national reputation as a daring and colorful leader of men, his brash feats and galvanizing rhetoric enhancing his stature with the troops and with the Northern public. Who could forget his sacrifice on the battlefield of Fort Donelson, the Civil War, right? Where he had been shot full of holes, left for dead, and miraculously survived. Or how he had rallied the troops at Raymond, Mississippi, charging against a fearsome wall of musket fire and grape shot. Or how he galloped along the ridge line, inspired his men at Vicksburg, defying the rebel snipers, who fired 100 shots at him, but couldn't bring him down. For these actions and more, General Grant had recommended Logan twice for promotion, and President Lincoln had agreed, elevating Logan first to Brigadier General after Fort Donelson, and then to Major General a year later. And as of last autumn, he had taken command of the 15th Corps, and added more laurels to his record, including standing boldly at Resaca on a hillock the rebels used for target practice, directing his artillery while remaining impervious to the exploding bombs around him, plunging into Camp Creek, and exhorting his men to swim to the other side to assault the rebels under a deadly cannonade, galloping along his lines at Dallas, Georgia, waving his hat and shouting, "Fall in, forward," while driving his troops to beat back a surprise Confederate assault, quote, "looking like the very god of war," as one soldier said, and taking a wound to the forearm, having it stitched up, and then riding back to the front lines with his arm in a sling to lead his corpsmen to victory, the next day getting shot in that sleeve again. This was the Black Jack his troops knew and that he had become, a warrior on his black steed Slasher who knew no fear, gave no quarter, and always rebounded, no matter how many times he had taken musket fire or been thrown from his horse. Okay, all right. That is going to be John Logan. That is the American Civil War, and we caught that author having a lot of fun. And that's a moment in a bigger narrative where you're just supposed to marvel at this lunatic. Okay, so I think of those three examples, and just by my own taste, the second one is probably my favorite. It was extremely readable. It was well aware that in order to write a narrative history, you need dramatic beats, but it was also really grounded in history. Whereas the third one, the one with Captain Logan getting shot to pieces every 5 minutes, it also was really good, really propulsive, but I worry when an author gives an entire page to such a thing. that the book might be occasionally stooping for that kind of thing too often. I could be wrong, because I haven't read these books yet. And the first one I think is one of those instances. It sometimes happens in page 112 tags where you get the feeling that to judge the book by this page would be very unfair. The page 112, the first one that we read about polar exercises from the Pacific Fleet that was not used to operating in those latitudes, very much gave me the impression that we were interrupting a serious historian in the middle of a longer piece of business. All page 112s for nonfiction will give you that impression, but that extra struck me. So I'm very much looking forward to reading all three of these books, but I am a little bit more disposed towards the middle one, and I'm curious to know which excerpts you thought were best. Certainly the third excerpt was the most colorful, but which of those three, if you were in the mood to read nonfiction, would you most likely go on to page 113? And I'll show you what they are. The first one about the Reagan-era naval exercises against the Soviets is this: Oceans Ventured, Winning the Cold War at Sea by John Lehman. A subject, the Cold War naval exercises, Cold War naval clashes, that I don't think I've ever read a whole book on. I've read a few histories of the Cold War from start to finish, but concentrating just on the naval side, I don't think I have. And then the second one, the one that gets my provisional first prize for this tag, I will report back when I've actually read these books. But just in terms of the one page that I like the most, was this. It's by Andrew Lawler, and it's The Secret Token, Myth, Obsession, and the Search for the Lost Colony of Roanoke. As those of you who aren't up on your American history, Roanoke was a colony in 1587. A group of men, women, and children went to Virginia and disembarked to set up a colony. And when further contact was brought to where they had landed, they were all gone. And the mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke has persisted ever since. I don't think there's much of a mystery, but it had all of the emblems that you would use for fantasy or for one of those breathless History Channel documentaries. Had a mysterious name carved in a tree, had no trace of the colonists left, no traces nearby that definitively state their fate. So I'm glad. The subject would interest me anyway. I never miss a book on Roanoke. But I'm glad that the excerpt that we read was so good. And then the third one, the one that had poor Captain Logan being shot to pieces all through his career, is, of course, as you can tell, it's American Civil War history. And it's by J.D. Dickey, and it's Rising in Flames. A new book coming out in June, all about Sherman's march and Sherman's war in the Deep South, which is a fascinating subject. It's brutal, and it's infuriating for me, but it's fascinating. So I'm glad that the author is a New York Times bestselling author of Empire of Mud, and he's written, as you could probably tell from that excerpt, he's written a huge amount of other stuff, of periodical stuff, where the whole goal is to tell stories like that and grab the reader's interest in only 1,500 words. So that shows, and the open question for me will be, does he dig deeper? Does he hit the longer stride of an actual historian in the course of the book? We shall see. So that's it. That is my page 112 tag for boring old nonfiction. This is Rising in Flames by J.D. Dickey, The Secret Token by Andrew Lawler, and Oceans Ventured by John Lehman. And parenthetical apology here for the cataclysmic noise, but I have the window open here in the room, and that I've noticed is increasing the background noise, but hopefully you can still hear me. And again, I'm curious to know what you thought of all of these, and also what you make of these books. I will report back on all of them. But I'm going to sign off for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.